The documentary you are about to watch was shot a year and a few months before the attacks of September 11th. At the time, we envisioned the program as part grand adventure and part political mission. The adventure was the journey itself, halfway around the world to a place utterly foreign and forbidding. Given that this was an adventure, you'll note that the tone of the show can sometimes be, we hope and assume, amusing. However, anything amusing about the situation was wiped away by September 11th, which brings us to the second reason we went to Afghanistan. Our self-appointed political mission was to alert Americans and others in the West to the character, the very essence, of this implacable enemy who seeks nothing less than our complete destruction. We think, as you watch the show, you will agree that we accomplished that goal, in all its horrifying reality and the evil that it portends. Afghanistan is about as far away from here as you can go. There should be a certain safety in that distance. There should be a certain safety being so far removed from the blood and hate, the war and fanaticism and terrorism, and all the rest of the insanity that has found a home in Afghanistan. There should be a certain safety for those of us so far away, for the West, for America, for you and me. But there isn't. Not anymore. This is Buzkashi. It's the national sport of Afghanistan. Brought here by Genghis Khan centuries ago, some Afghan horsemen are reputed to be direct descendants of the original Mongol invaders. This contest was held to commemorate the Afghan New Year and brought together hundreds of horses and riders from throughout the province who clashed for 10 straight days to gain glory for themselves and their villages. The rules are simple. Two teams battle over the carcass of a headless calf, aiming to score points by carrying and dropping the trophy inside a circle carved into the dirt. It's fast, exhausting, dangerous. And that's what they do for fun. Buzkashi is a step into another world. Another time. So the same can be said of Afghanistan, where the ancient ways and beliefs clash with modern realities and eternal ambitions. The result has proved violent and deadly, the pain endless and enduring. This game is being played in northeastern Afghanistan, where the United National Islamic Front for the Salvation of Afghanistan, also known as the Northern Alliance, rules over 20% of the country, the exact amount dependent upon the state of the war that day. The rest of Afghanistan is Taliban territory, and that means the band of Islamic fundamentalists who shelter international terrorist Osama bin Laden and other terrorist leaders, finance their rogue state through the global heroin trade, and force women to cover themselves from head to foot while denying them the most basic rights. We traveled there because we heard a fascinating story. Arab and Muslim extremists from all over the world have come to Afghanistan to train and fight for the Taliban and for bin Laden, to learn the truths not just of the soldier but also of the terrorist. The Northern Alliance had captured a number of these men in its war with the Taliban and were holding them in a POW camp deep within the Afghan mountains.
Nothing is more exciting and more enticing to a lot of us than the idea of a conspiracy. Whether it's Area 51, the Trilateral Commission, or who really killed Kurt Cobain, people love conspiracies, no matter how improbable. Forget all those, at least for now. The real conspiracy involves global terrorism. As unlikely as it might seem, this remote country, in a state of perpetual warfare, whether fighting the Persians, the Greeks, the Mongols, the British, or the Soviets, or, most often, fighting amongst themselves, has emerged as a center of that conspiracy. The notion that such a poor and ruined land could vent its religious and ideological fury in any form that could affect America or American interests is, at first glance, implausible, even ludicrous. But it's true.
That's why we thought it would be interesting to talk to these proto-terrorists deep in the Afghan mountains, men who had come from all over the world to volunteer and train and fight. And if you have any doubt that what happens in Afghanistan can touch us here, so far away, then remember what happened in Yemen and know that those two terrorists who blew up the USS Cole came from Yemen, traveled to Afghanistan, trained with bin Laden, and then returned to Yemen, now working with the terrorist leader and ready to pursue his murderous goals. And when you consider all that, suddenly Afghanistan is a lot closer than anyone had previously imagined, and the threats of the terrorists no longer seem so empty.
And when we come back, we'll look at the roads that kill trucks, the airstrip that kills planes, the weather, weapons, and wear and tear that kill helicopters, and the war that kills just about everything else. It's amazing. In 1978, a Soviet-backed coup by Afghan communists overthrew the king and took power. When that regime began to crumble, the Russians stepped in. Over the next decade, 50,000 Soviet soldiers and millions of Afghan men, women, and children lost their lives, culminating in the Soviet defeat and withdrawal in 1989. The puppet communist regime held on for a couple of years and then fell to the Afghans, who promptly fell to fighting each other, setting the stage for a group of students called the Taliban to emerge from the mountain villages and impose their harsh interpretation of the Quran upon city after city. Supported by Pakistan for Pakistan's own political purposes, the Taliban routed the internationally recognized government, led by President Rabbani and General Massoud. Rabbani and Massoud retreated to the north, where they established themselves under the banner of the Northern Alliance. And since it was the Northern Alliance that ran the prisoner of war camp with its captive terrorist audience, that meant we had to get to northeastern Afghanistan. And getting there is not exactly a snap.
Our small but intrepid band included Mike Connor, cameraman, and Julie Sears, former analyst for the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, Mike was along for the ride because, well, he's a cameraman and this was an interesting job. That was enough. Julie, on the other hand, was another story. For Julie, Afghanistan was more than a passion, more than a cause. It was her great white whale.
Say Civil War.
How profoundly felt was Julie's passion? She used her meager vacation time, a couple of weeks each year away from her DIA desk, to travel to Afghanistan on her own money without government approval or assistance. Twice. You probably won't be surprised to hear that it was Julie who told us the fascinating story about the POW camp. So we went, but there's one thing. Watch Julie. She's always smiling. Never trust anyone who's always smiling. Our trip started in Phoenix. We flew from Arizona to New York to London, London to Islamabad, Pakistan. That was the easy part. The UN employs a few small planes in the region for relief efforts. Charter one for the 90-minute flight over the mountains separating Pakistan from the nearest Afghan border town of Faizabad. If you don't relish the notion of skirting over these peaks, you can always try walking. If you make it, rumor is that it'll take you about 10 days. But watch your step, a wrong turn, and you could find yourself at Mount Everest, just up the road. So you're approaching Faizabad. That means it's time to dive between the mountains to avoid Taliban snipers and bounce to a stop on a metal grate the Soviets laid down during their long war here back in the 80s. Not every plane makes it, not even the big ones. Okay, so we're in Faizabad. Despite the natural inclination after this sort of journey to stay put, the next stop is Taliban, the capital of the Northern Alliance, one giant step closer to the POW camp. And that means getting on a helicopter captured by the Afghans from the Soviets. And that brings up two problems. First, figuring out how to get to Taliban, and second, actually getting there. It's not terribly far, half an hour by helicopter. Of course, getting that chopper to show up is another matter. Maybe it's a quarter century of continual war, or maybe it's just Afghan nature, but things never seem to go as planned. In this case, despite the personal assurance of the head of the armed forces that a helicopter would be waiting for us, this one arrived late, 2 days late. A government official later explained that the pilots decided, on their own, that some things take priority even over the war. Did you ever find out what happened yesterday, why the pilots didn't show up? Were they at the game?
Yeah, because it was a new year.
Right.
So everybody wanted to enjoy this day. So everybody went to see the game of Buskashi.
Yeah, you're allowed to just kind of fly somewhere when you're in the military and then just decide to take the afternoon off and go watch the game?
Yeah, in Afghanistan, it is there is no rule.
No rules?
No rules about the military in everything. Everything is opposite, so nobody is going according to law. Everything is illegal.
What?
Yeah, so...
How do they fight a war if there are no rules they have to follow? How do they actually fight the war? And
the war, so it is like a habit in Afghanistan. So everybody knows everything about the war. So now it is like a duty in this area. Yeah.
It's just part of your life.
Yeah, part of life. Yeah.
When the 1970 Soviet model with a warranty that had expired long ago finally showed up, the prudent passenger had to wonder just how vital this trip really was. Okay, here we are. Helicopter field. Helicopter. Taped up and ready to go. Get away from the helicopter. A government official was far from reassuring. How do they fly then?
Just it's according your luck. If you are lucky, you reach, you will have a good journey. If not
what? What's it? Does that happen a lot?
Huh?
Does that happen often?
Yeah, often.
Often?
Yeah.
Can't happen often. You don't have that many helicopters.
Yeah.
Often. Okay. Often.
We had a lot of this, around 80.
You had 80 of them?
80 helicopters. Our government, I mean.
Yeah.
But the government, he has just about 8 or something like this. All of them are...
80 to 8.
What type of helicopter is it?
A bad helicopter. That's the type of helicopter it is.
Is it Mi-17 or
4 months ago, one of them crashed?
Yeah, that's the one I was telling you about. Yeah.
What happened?
It was bombing.
Discussion ensued over the next 3 hours over who would be among the lucky to get a seat on the chopper. Well, I don't know what else works on this helicopter, but the window works. You definitely can get fresh air, any altitude, any time. There's our fuel tank over there, in case you're wondering. And our seatbelts are nowhere.
as you'll see, but that's not so bad because it allows you to stand up really quickly and lift the entire seat up in case you feel so inclined. Yeah, that's our pilot right behind us smoking. Yes, that's his cigarette, which actually, considering he's just a few feet and getting closer every second to the fuel, you might be wondering if that's FAA approved.
You might wonder why so many would be willing to risk their necks to get to Tahlequah via air. The reason is that the alternatives are not particularly attractive. While a four-wheel drive truck could traverse these mountains, the absence of any decent road means that the trip becomes an overnight trek, a trek significantly more dangerous than uncomfortable. A few years ago, 2 foreign aid workers tried it and were intercepted by bandits. The woman was raped, the man skinned alive. As with most things in Afghanistan, the choices are few, the options none too appealing. It was time to fly. Coming up, we'll show you life in Afghanistan with no worries of chlorine in the water, pollution from the power plant, or anything working the way it should.
You mean if you get out, you would kill me?
And later, we get up close and way too personal with some Taliban terrorists. When Abandon All Hope, Welcome to Afghanistan continues.
I guess I was kind of desperate to go to Afghanistan.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
Dawn in Tahlequah, capital of the Northern Alliance. That is, the capital when the Northern Alliance is in control of the city, a control that shifts with the fortunes of war. What is true throughout Afghanistan is true in Tahlequah. Life is hard. Everything is hard. The broad societal matters, building schools and factories, rebuilding hospitals and homes, ensuring public safety and public health, and the individual personal things too. Finding food when you're hungry, finding shelter when you're cold, finding work when there is none, finding faith and hope. And nothing gets better. Year after year, the work that builds and sustains a society goes undone. Schools crumble. Water systems collapse. Roads decay. Health services vanish. Electricity is a memory. Ordinary political authority disintegrates.
45.
Money becomes almost worthless.
47, 48, 49, 50. $500,000. Okay?
Entire villages perish. It often feels as if Afghanistan is sliding into a black hole from which there is no return. Remarkably, in the midst of all this, there are those who keep trying against all hope to build rather than destroy. So it is with these merchants who are buying and trading for goat meat from the surrounding villages, knocked off American clothing from Pakistan, cookies from Iran, and soda from Tajikistan, in order to fill the shelves of the small shops that line the main streets. The principal of this school for girls, or this shell of a school, is also struggling to make something better for his students. There are no books or pens or paper, let alone computers or any of the things we commonly associate with education.
And this is the administration office for the school.
But they don't have desks either, or records. They must have records.
Yeah, they just have some carpet, I think. When they live here and they put it.
Oh, for safekeeping, they pick it up?
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to learn like this when, you know, you're these kind of conditions.
The girls sat on the floor until a Swedish charity paid for the construction of these desks.
And how many have you made?
And now I made 100 chair for them, and I have program to make another 400.
Mm-hmm. The boys, incidentally, in their separate schools, are no better off. The principal is preparing for the new school year. Unlike in Taliban areas, girls are permitted to attend school, and given the opportunity, they attend in droves.
Can you translate this for us?
Yeah, it's about burqa, and it's an advice from the principal of the schools for other ladies to be careful about their protest.
Oh, it's about their attire. It's not about education. It's about covering up and making sure.
The principal had 1,700 girls from first grade to high school under his care. The new students have to fill out these forms, and there are many new students, a consequence of the shifting fortunes of war as the two sides battle and people are forced to flee their homes before the storm. It's a daunting task, perhaps an impossible task. Still, the principal perseveres because, as he sees it, the alternative is unacceptable. Others share the principal's devotion to this country, and not every one of them is a native. Julie is one of those drawn in almost irresistible fashion to Afghanistan.
They used to be, at least when the British were fighting against the Afghans, an Afghan song that went along the lines of, "There's a boy across the river with a bottom like a peach, but alas, I cannot swim."
I think that's a Little Richard tune, don't you? You could put that to music.
In truth, despite Afghanistan's extraordinary history, people, and culture, the dispassionate observer might have difficulty appreciating the strength of Afghanistan's appeal, an appeal that can move apparently reasonable people to leave their homes and risk their lives in this rugged and dangerous land. And Julie is hardly the only Afghan aficionado. Peter Mitchell, an Australian journalist we met in Tahlequan, was another Westerner who simply could not stay away from Afghanistan for too long. Let's listen in as they talk about some of their experiences.
Hey, are you guys going somewhere specific?
I guess I was kind of desperate to go to Afghanistan at that point, and waiting for peace just didn't seem to be working, so I decided now was as good a time as any to go, or at least 3 years ago.
I like the place. I'm a sucker for punishment, basically. I do enjoy it, and my Persian, although utterly appalling, does get me through.
At some level, it's not really logical. I know it's just one of those things. Different people have different interests, and for whatever reason, Afghanistan turned out to be mine. I've studied a lot of other subjects, but none of them has really caught my interest like Afghanistan has, so it almost feels like it's beyond my control.
And Afghanistan always, you mention the word Afghanistan, feels like, Afghanistan, it has that certain effect on people.
To keep the whole thing sort of low profile, since the Taliban aren't very fond of Americans, I went dressed as an Afghan woman, which was basically in the chaudhary, all covered up from head to toe. And because we were traveling that way and I was with other Afghans, including other women like that, I just left my passport behind in Pakistan and walked over the border into Afghanistan.
You never know exactly when it's going to go completely wrong. But
Yeah.
that's the
charm.
That is the charm. That is the charm.
And then we took a bus trip, the whole journey from Peshawar, which is on the border, to Pagman, which is where we stayed, was about 12 hours, mostly on a bus. I guess that was at least about a 10-hour bus trip. And I stayed, of course, covered up in this chaudhary and not speaking and just trying to keep very low profile so that no one started asking questions about who I was.
I put my faith in a shady character from Rokhar and Panjshir by the name of Malam Ahmad Shah.
Well, I guess most people haven't worn one of those veils, but it's kind of hard to breathe because it's very close. There's a little sort of embroidery over your eyes so that you can see a little bit, but over your mouth and nose it's just cloth. And I guess between that and bumping around on the bus and it being hot, I started to feel very queasy, and eventually I got sick a couple of times while I was on the bus. But there were other women doing that, so it didn't attract much notice.
You went native with your attire.
Fancy dress is half the fun, it really is. I really enjoy it. I dig the get-up.
Once I was there, it was when the Taliban were planning a large offensive, but oddly, when I arrived, it seemed very peaceful, and everyone seemed very relaxed. I found out later that the Taliban had actually made a move to take the valley and almost succeeded while I was there, but no one mentioned that until I saw them later.
It could be worse. I could be stuck here for 5.5 months like I was 2 years ago. So
that trip was the biggest problem, I think, because I didn't tell anyone except a couple of close friends of mine that I was going. Well, as I said, even when I went to Pakistan, I wasn't sure that I'd be able to make it in. I thought rather than get everyone nervous, and I would just tell them when I got back if everything had gone well. But of course, that's not a good thing to do, especially in a marriage, to go someplace and not tell your spouse. So that was a problem.
My visa has approximately about 60 hours remaining.
No, I was worried because my visa for Tajikistan was about to expire and the winter was coming on, and I knew it was harder for the helicopters to fly in the wintertime. And, I knew if I didn't make it out soon and had a problem with my visa, I'd miss Thanksgiving, Christmas, and the new millennium with my family. And much as I like Afghanistan, I was starting to miss them, so.
It's possible that I may be able to bribe my way out of the situation. The notoriously bribe-hungry officials of Tajikistan, I'm sure, would be happy to see my money. They may take all of it, which, of course, would be another problem.
Yeah, that... Well, I think the idea was that if I had gotten caught, we were hoping we could kind of just bribe my way out on the spot. But yes, if it had turned into more than that, then it would have been rather unpleasant.
Yes, that's true. Probably more so when you came home than being there even.
Probably kind of both, yes.
What's the bad thing that could happen?
They could jail me. They could jail me, rob me, etc.
Well, I accidentally wandered into a minefield when I was going around the front lines, and that kind of spooked me a little bit. I was traveling with a couple of other Westerners, and we were kind of touring around the front lines, and it seemed like the Afghans were always yelling "mine, mine" wherever I'd step. But this one particular time, I really had kind of wandered off from the group somehow, and they started screaming mine, and I looked up and I could tell by the faces of the other people I was traveling with that this time really was serious. And it was one of those very unpleasant moments when you want to be out of that situation very much, but the only way you can do it is to walk right through the minefield again. And I wasn't very deeply into it, maybe only about 20 feet, but that I'd rather not repeat.
That should help you decide if you want to include Afghanistan in your travel plans. So you won't come back here?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, traveling sometimes here can be very pleasant.
Have you been able to take a shower in the past X number of months?
No, but the usual, bucket and cup.
I think living here for a little while wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, a couple of years maybe, but then probably after that I might have it out of my system.
I love Afghanistan.
Welcome to Afghanistan.
As you know, sometimes a little rough being in Afghanistan, physically or otherwise, but just being here sort of makes me happy. I'm not sure exactly why.
Next, we get a very special look behind the veil. We bid farewell to our kidneys and see just how dangerous a trip to Afghanistan can be. A break from the misery and horror. One sunlit afternoon, on this lovely hilltop, we happened upon a rare sight in this country. Women without their burqas, that is, the Afghan veil. The North might be bereft of the brutal fundamentalism destroying the rest of the country, but it's still very conservative, and women go about covered up. However, on this afternoon, alone with their children and not expecting to see any men, the women had shed their normal reserve, and not even our appearance changed that. They welcomed us into their midst and allowed us to photograph them. It was a small thing, and we don't want to attach too much significance to it, but it was a nice moment, and in Afghanistan, a nice moment is significant enough to stop and take note. Break over. Now let's talk about reality again and some of the problems facing Afghanistan. We already ran through a long list. Let's briefly focus on just a single item on that list. The roads.
You mean say in the wrong way? We're going the wrong way?
Roads are something that you could be excused for taking for granted, given that they're virtually everywhere you ordinarily go, and almost everywhere in fine shape. This is not mere happenstance. It has always been self-evident that you can't have a unified country, a functioning government, and a flourishing economy without roads to bring law and order to the land, stability and services to the community, people and products to the marketplace. The Romans understood this and built an empire on the quality of their roads. And it is true today as it was 2,000 years ago. Despite the absolute necessity of an adequate transportation network, it's a safe bet that to build even a rudimentary road system in Afghanistan would probably cost as much as a mission to Mars. Who's going to foot that bill? It makes no difference who eventually wins the civil war. Whether it's the Taliban or the Northern Alliance, the answer's the same, and the answer's nobody. Nobody's chipping in, nobody's anteing up, nobody in Afghanistan, and certainly nobody outside. And that's just one problem. Consider other fundamental matters: water and electricity.
Also, though, the water table here, I think, and the level of most of the toilets, that the bores that they sink are about of equal depth, and so the mixing of the water and the bacteria is inevitable. So if you're drinking from the well, it's a matter of time.
A glance at the water as it flows through Tahlequan, or courses along a stream, or simply sits in a pitcher on a table speaks volumes.
Do you notice the way that they wash their dishes, kind of, or kind of don't?
Yeah, it's fairly alarming, actually. The lack of crockery hygiene around the place.
Well, how do they do it?
With one glass into the next. They fill it usually to about this level, and then pour it into each one, and then rub their fingers around the insides for several seconds, ensuring that the bacteria is lining the inside of the cup, and then they pour away.
You know, I thought I saw somebody do that, but I wasn't sure I actually saw it.
No, you did. Believe me, you saw it.
An electrical grid that once provided power for much of Afghanistan has deteriorated through neglect, looting, and war, leaving just a few watts of electricity available only now and then to scattered communities. Tahlequan has only gas-operated generators in a few government buildings. Faizabad's 4 hydroelectric turbines are now reduced to 1, which works at partial capacity on occasion. This lack of electricity has led to the cutting down of no less than 70% of Afghanistan's forests for firewood for cooking and heating, causing the air in many cities to be thick and dirty, especially at night. Considering the difficult conditions of life in Afghanistan, as well as the fact that the forces of the Northern Alliance are fighting our mutual enemy, the Taliban, many in the North do not understand why the U.S. doesn't support them. Mohammed Asak, a Northern Alliance official, and now its representative in the U.S., questions the lack of American concern and involvement.
The problem is that these Taliban who have come to Afghanistan, they don't think that this is their mission ends here. This is why they are recruiting people from Central Asia. They are recruiting people from other countries, and their mission is to send their, export their ideology to other areas. And as a result, the tension between Pakistan, the main supporter of the Taliban, and those other countries who feel threatened by these warmongering policies of Pakistan has increased. And I think...
Like which countries? Like
Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Russia, even Taliban have recognized the Chechen, movement, and they have opened an embassy for them, and they have given refuge for Osama bin Laden, who is operating outside Afghanistan, even against American citizens. So this is why I think this is enough ground for concern for the United States. And since we are opposing the Taliban and we have a territory under our control and we are a legitimate government of Afghanistan, this is why I think we expect that they should support us in our struggle.
In that case, why do you think you haven't gotten that support?
It's a pity that Americans, after the Cold War, left Afghanistan and left Afghanistan in the hands of the regional powers like Pakistan and others who are competing for the spread of their influence. And I think that now some Americans have expressed their concern that we made a mistake by allowing Afghanistan to become like a breeding ground for regional tension and terrorism and drug and all that, it was as a result of, abandoning Afghanistan after the Cold War. In order to stop this, Americans should take interest and make use of their influence, political as well as moral, in order to, help the peace process in Afghanistan.
All these problems wear away at a society as well as lead to instant tragedies. An example of how this works on both the larger societal stage and on the more personal level from our own journey. A few days after we left Afghanistan, one of those helicopters we were flying in blew up. The main rotor spun off, smashed into the tail, and the ship went down in flames, killing all 16 people aboard. This occurred right over Tahlequah in midday in full view. Almost anywhere else, you can be sure that the remaining helicopters would have been grounded. If you can pretend for a moment, they would have been allowed to fly in the first place. In Afghanistan, the surviving helicopters continue to fly. They fly because they have to, because the helicopters are the key link to the world beyond. So they will fly until they explode or shut down or simply fall apart. And when the helicopters are gone, they will have their horses. And in Afghanistan, it will be as it has always been. When we return, we will confront the men who wish, more than anything else, more than preserving their own lives, to destroy ours, to bring down our society and everyone in it.
He's a terrorist, he does his terrorism.
The camp was some 40 miles from Tahlequah, hidden away in the mountains. It held 98 prisoners who represent only a fraction of the total of Taliban and bin Laden supporters and fighters milling through the region. While Afghanistan is where the fledgling terrorists train and fight, and where bin Laden foots the bill for his own brigade, 700 strong, comprised of more Arabs than Afghans, the best equipped and most determined of all the Taliban troops, often committing suicide rather than surrendering when trapped, Pakistan is home to hundreds of schools that promote the idea of jihad, or holy war, against the West. In fact, though they call themselves schools, they are fundraising and recruiting centers, dispatching clerics across the Muslim world to even the most remote areas of the Muslim world to convince young men to come and fight in Afghanistan and elsewhere. This man is from Western China. This one from Great Britain. This one from Burma. Listen to the prisoners, many of whom were ready to talk, crowding around the camera, glad for this change in their routine of farm work, praying, and a great deal of sitting and waiting. Try to understand the motivation of individuals who, unable to speak any of the local dialects, without any means to retrace their steps home, would leave their families and travel hundreds or thousands of miles to fight in a strange land. They know they have virtually no prospects of release, not while the war continues. Listen and judge for yourself.
Come to an end. America is a country which doesn't fight anywhere, and all the fights are due to America. The reason is America and France and Great Britain. These 3, 4, 5, 6 countries. These are the reason. They are fight creator. All the problems in the world are created by them.
This was a constant theme, blaming America for the war in Afghanistan, as well as troubles everywhere. So are the Pakistanis good Muslims?
No.
No? Why?
Because they do not obey law of Islam.
Well, then isn't it wrong for you to take their help? If they're not good, isn't it wrong to take help from bad Muslims?
No, it is not good. It is very correct. Because if we make ourselves strong through help of loose Muslims, not wrong.
So you mean if you actually get this help from Pakistan and win, then wouldn't you then turn around and invade Pakistan and make them change and be good Muslims?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about. The Taliban seem to be making a lot of money selling drugs or allowing the sale of drugs. Do you think that's so?
Yes. So what?
Well, isn't that against your religion?
It's against religion to kill a Muslim with drugs, but to sell them it's a long, it gets very difficult, very complicated. It's in the religious books. I mean, I could sit down and explain to you for weeks and you still won't get to the end of it, what I'm trying to say.
This Yemenite's feelings about America, which required a three-way translation from Arabic to Pashto to English, were to the point.
We believe that the United States are kafirs, they are unbelievers, and so we will fight against them, and we will kill them.
And kill them? That's not very nice. You mean, you know, we're American too. Do you think you should kill us? I mean, do you think we deserve that? Ask him that.
Yeah. I know you're from America, but I'm in prison now in here. I cannot kill you. So
well,
if I be independent, I will kill you.
You mean if you get out, you would kill me?
إذا حررت من هنا إذا خرجت إلى الخارج وحررت يعني أنت تقتلني؟ إن شاء الله. إن شاء الله. أول دعوة بعدين قتل.
إن شاء الله means maybe.
Wow.
I hope.
You hope? Well, I guess I hope not then. Does that really, is that what your religion teaches you, to kill people who have nothing to do with you whatsoever?
This is the order from Holy Quran and also from the prophets.
So you think it's good if people study and become terrorists and go to the United States and try to blow up buildings and blow up airplanes and things like that? You think that'll accomplish something?
And he says it is a civilized action, and everything which it is in the holy books, and it is right, and we will do that.
So is he the kind of guy, because he believes so strongly, that he'd be willing to, like, let's say, strap a bomb around his stomach and go blow up a bus of school children because that's the right thing to do? Would he do that?
The scholars, the religious scholars order us, we will do that.
Wow, that's a real showstopper. It's hard to think of what to say after that, you know? Could you tell them that I think that's like, there's nothing godly or religious or decent or human about killing children to further any belief?
Islam refused to kill small children, but it orders to kill the younger. So they can think about.
Well, if he's such a big bad soldier, how come he got captured and he didn't die fighting?
It was willing of the God, which I captured him.
That he threw his gun down, raised his hand, and said, "Please don't shoot me." And that was the gods doing it, or him? You don't have to repeat that. I think we got enough. Thanks a lot, you son of a...
Conditions show this. In Afghanistan also, I mean, it is from your hand. Until you don't want to end it, it doesn't end. I don't know why you don't take pity on these people, I mean.
Do you think the Taliban are wrong in protecting and supporting bin Laden?
They are wrong?
Do you think they are?
I don't know. I mean, the guy was here before the Taliban were here. He was here from the time of Russia. He was here, and now nobody knows where he is. I mean, there's Arabians in this prison. They don't know where he is.
Do you agree with his methods and what he does?
Is terrorism? The guy's a terrorist. I mean, everybody has to do his occupation. If I'm a doctor, I'm going to treat someone. He's a terrorist. He does his terrorism.
As unreasonable and unreasoning as all this might sound to you, remember one thing. Just because somebody is unreasonable and unreasoning, or to cut to the chase, just because he's stupid and crazy, doesn't mean he's not dangerous. Who's crazier than a suicide bomber? 2 suicide bombers, happily blowing themselves to bits in order to kill American sailors, for the glory of their cause and their God. We said in the beginning that we came to Afghanistan because we heard a good story, and we traveled halfway around the world to pursue that story, and it looked like we found it. I already mentioned what motivated Mike and Julie to make the trip. I suppose I fell somewhere in the middle between the two. Like Mike, I appreciated the story for being a story worth telling, pure and simple. and I was also intrigued by the geopolitical implications, though I felt none of Julie's emotional attachment to the place and the people. And so, when we returned home, I was satisfied with the job we had done.
But not long after, Yemen happened and everything changed. Instead of being an interesting story with good visuals starring some lunatics who were reassuringly far away, it had transformed into a tale of immediate, frightening relevance. It became a story that begged to be pasted onto a canvas larger than just Afghanistan, spun into a wider web that incorporated Afghan links to Hamas, Hezbollah, and other Islamic terrorist groups. We could include other terrorist actions with an Afghan connection, from the World Trade Center bombing to the attacks on U.S. embassies in Africa, to the Chechnya war against the Russians, to insurgencies in Central Asia, Western China, and Kashmir. And we could keep spinning outward and take on the ties that bind Mideast terrorists to Russian mobs offering nuclear weapons to the highest bidder, Mexican drug cartels seeking to expand their markets, Colombian death squads offering protection services, Chinese criminals smuggling illegal immigrants into the U.S., on and on. But that's enough for today. We begin and end this examination of the global terrorist conspiracy in Afghanistan through that narrow focus, this solitary journey to a distant and forbidding land.
A land where the majority of the country is ruled by people who would destroy some of the most ancient and universally celebrated Buddhist statues in order to purge Afghanistan of all religious symbols and ideology inconsistent with their interpretation of the Quran.
In the same way that the deadly Ebola virus emerged from deep inside Africa to threaten the world, think of what is happening in Afghanistan as the site of a new and horrific infection that is spreading beyond its borders and spilling out across the planet with no cure in sight. In other words, Afghanistan is about as far from here as a place can be. Unfortunately, that might not be far enough.
All the problems in the world are created by that.